All right, y'all, we are here back at it for a very special episode. We've made a lot of conversations together, and this is really a first time to be talking like this. We're gonna get into a little listening party today for a very special project that came out a little while back. But before we get to that, we have a special guest host joining us today, which also does not happen every episode. Very happy to have you with us. Jacoby Cochran's in the building.
Yeah.
What's up,
Brr.
Boom, boom.
I don't know what to do at that moment.
I rarely do myself.
I don't know the
That's
last
why
time
it's
I
ridiculousness.
did
That's
I don't know the last time I got that one off.
Yeah, you hit it though.
Whatever you do it well, you know? And I think that actually perfectly leads to how I think we both see you and why we wanted you in this conversation. Like, we'll get to what we're here to talk about, but we both see you as like a really skilled interviewer, journalist, media maker, but also just like someone very attuned on like a creative and artistic level, like someone with taste is I think what I would say. And so, yeah, let's start how we always start. For this moment, you're the guest. And our two-part question for our guests is centered around time. Define time however you will, this hour, this day, this season, this lifetime. How is the world treating you, and how are you treating the world, Jacoby?
That's a good question. I've watched so many of y'all episodes, and I knew it was coming, and yet I still didn't prepare to answer the question. I think the world right now is treating me with, I'd like to say a little bit of grace. It's like I feel like right now I've been given some opportunities to explore my creativity, try different things, whether it's storytelling, whether it's making podcasts, whether it's, trying my hand as an interviewer, which a couple of years ago I had never really done in a professional way. And so I think the world is giving me a little bit of grace. And I think I'm treating the world with patience, which is not something I probably would have said before right now. I think these last few years doing the work over at CityCast Chicago, when I first started, I feel like every story angered me in a way that was so clear, so visceral. We could be talking about the best place to get pizza, and I would just, think about the concentration of pizza places in one neighborhood versus another. And I am immediately now thinking about hundreds of years of segregation in a way that like strips me of all joy. And so I think doing this work over the last 4 years has kind of taught me to treat like my city with a little bit more patience, treat my community with a little bit more patience, the people I'm in interpersonal relationships, and then ultimately myself. And so I think the world has been very kind and given me grace, and I've tried to return that with a little bit of patience.
I love that. I could just picture you being like, half pepperoni, half cheese. That sounds like redlining. You know what happened last time we were separated?
We need to do a pepperoni distribution
all
breakdown.
All of the protein resources on one side of the pizza. What about the south side of the pizza?
Why is the Italian Fiesta never on none of y'all lists? This don't make no sense to me.
Sauce is looking thin.
But I feel that relates, definitely.
And so kind of to that conversation around patience and process and stepping into your own, I think that kind of brings us to what we're here to do. So for those of y'all who have not come to these types of episodes we do before, we take a new album that just came out by an artist in our ecosystem, and we use like 3 or 4 of the songs from it to really dive deep into the process, the questions, what's coming together. And so today we're going to do that with an album by our very own Damon A. Williams. Hey. That was so sheepish. That was so coy. And yeah, we'll just use these songs from the project. When can you just name when this project came out?
It came out September 19th. Technically is the date that is on the thing. There was some like hiccups with some of the streamings. 21st. Yeah. Around my birthday.
Some real pepperoni situations over there.
Yeah, but the beginning of the fall of 2014. 2024. Jesus Christ.
Talk about it.
I gotta get 2014 out my brain.
Seriously. And so before we hop into the first song, Dane, what should people like? I know you've done some talking, and the two of y'all have been in conversation in person. But can you just give a little bit of like what this project means to you?
Yeah, there's what it means to me, and then what I hope it means to people that happen to engage it.
Fuck, I'm talking about you.
But what it means to me, it is in many ways it is like a proof of life, and like, which is ironic because we have a whole archive of years of like being present, but a lot of my work has been facilitating outside of myself. So part of that was like intentional, and part of that was also related to like a difficulty of self-activating, self-prioritizing, organizing my own life beyond external stimuli or external request. And so for me, in process is about, even though it's not, every line isn't about this, it as a body of work is about me being in process of like reaching my full humanity. And it's ironic because my whole shtick is about like, we are building a revolution, which is about being more human. And in that, I feel like I have lost, sacrificed, or not prioritized or tapped in to my own humanity. And so in many ways, it's a gift to myself of knowing I can be and be more of who I see myself as than just like what the world is asking of me.
Because that's very true. People may not know this, but Damon's been a rapper this entire time.
Yeah, before all of this. That's how basically all this shit started.
And like, I think I've had glimpses of parts of you that are not public parts throughout all those years, and I've seen like that has never been a thing that wasn't a part of how you saw yourself, how your practice, wrestling with language has always been, in that form, has always been part of how you move through the world. And so I can imagine like trying to make the outside match with the inside on that a little bit. What did it feel like to have that outside and inside match, like in the early days of it being out in the world, in the complicated feelings of it?
I mean, with all like art and all things that we produce, there's like the struggle of like what you wanted to do and that. But that aside, in terms of like reach and impact and engagement, for me, it allows me to stand in my dignity more. I think the feeling that had been the hardest of all the different types of work that I do is I am often a teaching artist that talks to young people, whether it's in school, in a program, in a juvenile detention center, wherever. And I'm approaching it as a teaching artist more than like as an organizer, even though that's what informs it. And so, like you said, like the practice was always there and had verses and bars and chants and hooks and refrains and things that I would use for the work or for movement. And so, I would make an impact with a young person. They would like how I teach, or that I would do a verse like, oh, you rap, do something. And like, they'd be like, oh shit, oh man, you be spitting.
Nothing a young person likes more than coercing someone to rap when they say they rap. I would say that's
and like low-key I'm being coy about it.
Yeah.
Like, oh no, I don't, but like I really want them to ask me to so that I can do it.
And they kind of want you to be great, and they also kind of want you to be terrible.
Yeah. Exactly. And so like knowing that that's the test and like breaking through that is always a joy. And then kind of without fail, the question of like, you got any stuff out, or where can I hear your thing, or you release, and the working through of trying to give that answer without shame was always a struggle. And so that just as a microcosm of like, it's not about virality, it's not about it's not even really about like revenue or stage or platform, but to be able to go into the room of like, these are all the things I do and I am realized in them, and no one did this for me. No one, not to say like, oh, I did all myself, but like, no, there was no supportive effort, there was no mentor, there was no funder, that it was my will and my intuition, with partnership with Galaxy Francis, with support from my partner, emotionally and otherwise. But it was something that I initiated and then completed into the world, and that feels like such a victory.
I think that's one thing that is so beautiful about the work is you are clearly someone, having known you over the last few years, who meets the moment, like meets the time, meets the situation. And it's something about creating a piece of work that is not on a deadline, that is not for a particular conference or for a particular protest or for a particular class. It is something that you have to see from ideation through sort of giving it to people and then sitting with others. And when I finished it, and as I was preparing for our listening session a few months ago, I went back and listened to some of the original music you made with your sister. And I tried to put myself in the position of the person who missed the time in between and to hear and process and to sit there and go, man, this person has been through something, has come out on the other side of something, is still persevering through things, is in collaboration with others. And you hear I won't say the remainder of the roots, but like you hear that younger version of yourself from that original music, and yet it feels as if you have like gone away to really think about what it means to make this music. And you hear that in the layering, you hear that in the messaging. And so it is a process that feels intentional. It feels like it took time, and to kind of know the broader story of the struggle to get to this point artistically, not even thinking technically or functionally, is I think a really beautiful part of this project. That I'm excited for people listening to this to dive further into.
Before we get to the first song, without getting maybe deeper than you want to get,
I'm willing to go deep.
In that window, that long window, what was the point where it felt the least likely to you, like a project would be in the world? Shouldn't have preemptively opened the door.
No, that's a good one. So I'll say this as I struggle to like pinpoint a specific moment to that really great question. So it was probably, I remember talking to No Name in 2012 and being like, yeah, I think around like 2014 or something, I'm gonna make a project and right. So like from about 2013, 2014, this was something that like felt like an internal assignment I had for myself. And it got to a point in many stages of like what the gift of completion is like one of the biggest fears I had, particularly as someone who like dedicated my life to basketball and had to make a decision to leave that. And like, that's different because like you need a team, a league, a school, referees, like that's a very time constrained space, right. Basketball. But the feeling of like regret, even though I feel dignified in that choice, of like, oh, there's a high likelihood that like I will have a lifelong regret of never completing this. And so the gift is to like now, regardless of like if nobody listens to the podcast, nobody, I got some streams or whatever, but if like no one else clicks on it, that is removed from my life. And so probably going, probably 2019 to 2021 is probably, where it felt the most in question, and where I was becoming more was asked upon me in terms of speaking for movement. And like, that's just like something we'll talk about a lot. Like there has been something historically whack about the like person leading the campaign or being the spokesperson for something that's collective political, also doing this self-promoting performance thing and the way that those interact with each other. And so there was a feeling of like, oh, this is hard for me. I'm not activating on it in the way that like with the type of dedication I know it requires. And there is this whole other space that is asking things, and I value it. And so my thought was like kind of like, you have kids and it's like, well, now you pour everything into your kids, like,
and you can do that,
right
now.
Yeah. And so like there was a like, oh, I'll be the writer educator and we'll do our AirGo Respire thing, and like, I'll have a little chant or a little thing here and there, and I'll be a teaching artist at large who uses hip hop tradition as a way to have class. But yeah, there was a time probably in that era where I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna do it.
Well, I'm glad you did, and I think we should jump into the first song we're gonna play. It's also the first song that I and most people heard that ended up on the album, which is "Messy Moments." For sure.
Messy Let's go further, let's go deeper. Now we are each other's keeper. If we speed up, can you keep up? Reaching depths you never seen before. I don't want to stay clean no more. I just wanna keep you close. Life is dirty, don't you worry. Messy moments mean the most. Remember when I seen a ghost interrupt the speech and toast. Lost my manners, nothing matters when you hooked and need a dose. I know the game, I know the ropes. Read the book and took some notes. Lust and trust is not enough. We out of luck, it's all a joke. Watch the clock, watch your folks. Taking risks, we'll see results. Make a miss, we feel the pulse. They still our votes, we still revolt. Your voices sound so good to me. Was just two, but now it's three. Fearless to stay clearer, we the realest you will ever see. Don't you love the melody? Erase all the felony. Free the people, see no equal coming for the equity. Can I have an extra piece? Battling my selfish greed. No one's here to keep the peace, so they gon' hear us yell like queen. Let's go further, let's go deeper. Now we are each other's keeper. If we speed up, can you keep up? Reaching depths you never seen before. I don't want to stay clean no more. I just wanna keep you close. Life is dirty, don't you worry. Messy moments mean the most. I had a day with destiny. Didn't think we'd ever leave. Pulled a trick from down my sleeve. Talking slick and lick my teeth. Your touch it feel like ecstasy. I just want you next to me. Don't chase it when you taste it, baby. Perfected the recipe. We just gotta hold the line. They will not control our mind. You get it when you read the sign. Out of soul we leave behind. Show me yours, then you'll see mine. How do you conceive of time? Change the rules we redefine. We just gonna sing our rhymes. Let's go harder, let's be softer. I'm accepting what you offer. Emptied out the coffers, now it's time to go all in. The margins razor thin, this hit cut beneath the skin. The rumors couldn't fool us, we know too much to pretend. Let's go further, let's go deeper. Now we are each other's keeper. If we speed up, can you keep up? Reaching depths you never seen before. I don't want to stay clean no more. I just wanna keep you close. Life is dirty, don't you worry. Messy moments mean the most. Let's go further, let's go deeper. Now we are each other's keeper. Reaching depths you never seen before.
So that was Messy Moments, the second track off of In Process.
It feels at different points throughout the album that there's like clear moments where you're like attacking the status quo, like speaking like very, what's the word I'm looking for? Like speaking extremely directly towards like the people who maintain boundaries and barriers to liberation. There's like a clear sense of like not only tear down like some like theoretical like staples of power, but like tear down actual people. And yet you often make space to say, hey, there is contradiction within each of us. There is hypocrisy in all of us. And so even as I say, you know, can I cuss on this? Right. Even as I say, fuck the other side, like recognize that like that is not necessarily directed towards you. So like, how did you throughout the album try and like navigate between these songs that are like very aggressive, like very directed towards like ideologies that stand like against you, but simultaneously like reach out to your community and know that like, you know, that is no one size fits all.
So one, that balance is just like what I try to hold, you know, like for some people, particularly in like Chicago community, I'm known as the like love and beauty guy. You know, the we love you if you love yourself, you know, we gonna make a new world, you know, these like refrains.
I thought you was talking about like you or
myself. Oh no, like the magazines.
Like a box of like pink, like, you know, for like
I was
like hair conditioner.
You're trying to get some Avon products.
I be ugly out here. That's different.
Love and beauty.
No, like the spiritual love, the communal love, like, you know, being cheery and positive, but it's in the face of structural genocide and very real defiant resistance, right? Like we started as a fuck the police people. Like that that's how I know all these people. Was first things first, fuck that. And then from there, if we really mean that and want to stay together, what is then required of us?
But it started with the people who were willing to show up at a specific place at a specific time and say, fuck the police.
Basically all of this. And so, but knowing that that's not I've learned now that that's not a sustainable energy to stay in. But then also the love and beauty and, everything's going to be all right is not honest enough to the full of what people are experiencing. And so I did not set out to I need to make an album that does these two things. But as I was in the process, one, just wanting to create that balance, and two, again, so much of it came the original ideas or content came either in innate moments of flow or through deep meditation. And so it wasn't these are the 9 topics I need to reach. It's I'm going through this process and building practice. And through practice, these are the things that are coming out the clearest. And so some of it was just a result of the experience. Some of it was not designed. It was emergent.
So let's design that process a little bit. Obviously, that's the name of the album. I'm looking at your shirt. Very lovely merch. You can get it now somewhere.
No, they can't. I mean, they could if they reach out to me, but there's not just a place to go.
Hit up Ever Spare Media. We can do that. We have merch. It is not available now.
I desire for people to get it, but no, I didn't set that up.
No word for anyone to get it.
And I love that there was not even a space for this won't come out right after we finish this. But he was by the time it comes out,
I'm not gonna have this shit together.
It won't be available.
Don't want to make any false promises, but we'll see each other.
But when you say in process, let's whatever level you want to define what you mean by that. What is this process?
It's a couple-fold. There's the pre-process that led to actual production, and then there's the process that happened in production. And again, I didn't set out to name it that. It just, the language appeared, and it was that is the most perfect to what's literally happening, but also these larger in the world ideologies. So again, there's, just to tell the story, me and my sister were a group that produced music from 2011 to 2013. And then in 2014, did a stage, a musical hip hop stage show that really seeded the ideas that prompted us to build and be a part of the Let Us Breathe collective, which started in the Ferguson Uprising in 2014. And then this comes out, I started recording this in 2022, and this comes out in 2024. And so in that period, again, talking about this difficulty, this confidence, this am I who I think I am? And I need to be getting better, and I'm not really in the space. You hear stories of the collectives we know, but historic Wu-Tang, it's 9 of us, and every day we together, and he gonna write a 16, and I'm gonna write a 32, and iron sharpens iron, and I felt very isolated and alienated, and in that felt passive.
If it's any consolation, it must have been so musty while that was
yeah. I had better airflow.
Yeah, I'm just saying, there's trade-offs.
Ain't nobody even noticing that when they broke.
And so within that, there was this challenge of I'm not getting enough shots up. And one thing that humbled me was real street rappers, or the work that I do, particularly around juvenile detention, seeing that incarcerated people who have none of the things that I'm using as an excuse, where's the producer that's going to take care, what engineer, how much does it cost, would come home after captivity with notebooks full of work, And so that made me have to check in of if I have my freedom and this time, I should be in practice with what my artistic passion is. And so then my slightly I'm Virgo Libra Cus for people who care about that. I don't exactly know what that means, but I've been told as an adult I'm much more Libra than Virgo, but there's some of that in there. And so my slightly Virgo side was okay, on some Kobe shit, a project is on average about 10 songs, 9 to 12, in there. A song is about 2.5 verses. If I want to present to the world, and we talked about this a lot of practicing before you put out other artists that we know or friends that we have.
Make hundreds of songs.
Yeah. And so I was I need to write at least 250 verses to feel comfortable offering the world 25. One, it'll give me better, and at least 10%. Even if I'm not good or as good as I think I am, at least my best 10% is good.
Right. That's really good cherry pick out.
And so and then learned how to keep time without a click or without music. And so had then this process of like trying on a daily basis, but not keeping it that, to like write a verse every day. And so with that, I had this then document. Shout out to Benjamin Earl Turner, who showed us his like notes doc a few years ago.
I will say this is one of the
that was a big one. Yeah,
it has changed both of our lives. Did not know that when you have notes on a Mac computer that you can organize it into folders on the side, which feels like, I guess, the world has just been functioning with that knowledge. Shout out Benjamin, put me on it. Dramatically changed both of our lives.
Yeah. So my shit was all in notebooks and just scattered and just happened. And I had like 9 different notebooks. And so seeing his organization, started this Google Doc and was like able to count. And then just like on a day where I'm bored or not feeling good about myself, I can just like to myself practice performing 40 verses in a row. Like, how does that sound to me? How does that feel? So that was like the pre-process.
It does explain what you were doing all this time. I was like, what's Damon up to? This is what Damon was up to.
So that's the pre-process. And, one day what became the hook and first verse of Messy Moments, like 90% of that just like kind of came to me, and it took like 12 minutes to write it down. And so that was just it wasn't even designed as a song. The actual hook was the beginning of a verse. And so I had that in the pocket, and then my partner Jennifer, and a few times through those, I would have a studio session here with somebody or sit in there, and like it never clicked or never like built to anything. Booked a session with now Galaxy Francis, artist formerly known as L.A. Van Gogh, we had on the first 100 episodes, so check that out back in the crates, and we'll probably bring him back on. Just to go as an engineer, just to go have a session. And I had, I'm explaining this story to him, like I got all this shit, I don't know. And the idea of YouTube beats up until this point really did not sit well with me. It really was not generative. But he's like, man, let's just, try to throw something on. What you got? I did a couple. He's like, oh, what's that? And like, we just did some YouTube beat searching. And then I had turned the first part of the verse into a hook. And there was a hook in the verse. Like, oh, this feels good. This sounds good. He's a great engineer in addition to being an artist and producer. And so for close to a year, like 9 to 10 months, it was just practice of one, let me kind of do A&R listening of like, all right, I got all this stuff. Let me try to find sounds that work with it. What are the energies? And I'm just going to be in this process of practicing of how do I sound good? How do I build these references? And from there, I can step to producers with a little bit more power and confidence. As opposed to like, hey man, you got some beats? It's like, no, these are the pieces that I'm working on, and I need to design music around what I have. And so Messy Moments was the first session we did, like the verse and the hook. And then after a while, went to somebody, tried to get a beat made. It didn't really fit, and we had been building this practice, and he would kind of be doing production with the 2 tracks, with the YouTube track of, slowing some down here, taking out the high end there. Right. He understood what we were building. And so he's like, let me take a stab at it. And it was like the perfect sound, and it was closer to the reference in a way that he understood it. And it felt really, really good. And so I didn't go in like, oh, we're going to make this project together. It started as a process of I'm trying to build, and our collaboration became the most comfortable to like continue on. And so then I had this folder that was like, I got these 30 something reference tracks. I need to, again, get more organized. So the thing that were just the references is like, all right, what are the ones I want to build more songs from? And I just named that the in process folder, because those were the tracks that were literally in process of being produced. And when I saw it, a folder with those tracks with the word in process on it, I'm like, that's exactly it. Because at the same time of this technical production process that people might not care about, what I've been trying to, all of this is about is that liberation or revolution is not an event or an outcome. It is the process of becoming more human collectively. And so that's just the message to the world. Right. But then also for me, it was like how I was able to get to a place of feeling more alive.
So before we move to the next song, I want to ask something specifically about this.
About Messy Moments.
Yeah, about this language of messiness, which we've known each other a long time, not my most comfortable mode. And so it's in some ways like a little bit of a challenge to see the value and the difference in what we actually mean when we say the difference between like combative or petty and messy. And so why did that speak resonate?
To you? I want to shout out something Trina Reynolds Tyler said during the height of fracture and conflict of the BYP 100 era. We were in one of them big ass circles, And what she was just like prompting folks as a preventative measure is like, we need to show up actually more raggedy with each other. And like, that's not the prompt of this, but like just that idea, I think really speaks to being our full selves and understanding that like, if we're going to be in anything together, we have to hold all of us. And the truth is, the real us is, or, you know, the language she was using was raggedy. And so that's, at the time I was like, oh, that sounds really cool. I agree with that. But also like, can we get through this shit a little bit smoother, you know? And then, you know, 4 or so years of experiencing so much messiness, but then realizing that like now I've built a knowledge base off this. There's so many now experiences where people are going through other shit. And it's like, wow, actually it wasn't the successes in holding people that give me the things to teach about the most. It's actually being able to analyze, reflect on the moments where things felt smooth, especially like, you know, we talk about these things in general, but most of this work is centered around Black people in America who are traumatized. And we're gathering to face that trauma or the roots of that trauma in many ways. And it spills out on each other. And I think there's not an expectation that that's going to happen.
When people enter into it.
Right. And so like the thing that I want folks to know is that entering in this space, that what you're signing up for is messiness. And that actually is, you know, to some 1 million experiments talk, like the data we need for what we need to build comes through that. And at the same time, all of the tracks I'm attempting to parallel, like I don't want it to just be an organizing manifesto. I also want it to be interpersonal or for human beings that don't know none of this.
Right.
And so at the same time, the language felt very appropriate for like, I'm also experimenting in a new generation of what like intimate partnership looks like. So I'm at home with Jennifer and like realizing that, you know, we're sometimes idealized as a couple, you know, to the community of like being the couple that has stayed together. We're counting on y'all. We're counting on y'all to put some years in. And so
it's like we're not double dating, but we are to the world. Like,
so the idea of let's go further, let's go deeper. That's what came to me, like just as language. And then it was like, oh, I was looking at her, and then I was also having memories of the Laquan McDonald video release day. And like, if we speed up, can you keep up? Like the idea of like, there are thousands of people out here marching at a pace that we're leading, and we need all of us together. And so like and realizing that those are some of the same muscles, right? Like dealing with the messiness of a group of 30 or a group of 5,000, and also dealing with the person you care about the most. All of that is going to be messy, but that partnership means so much to my life. This work means so much to my life. It has provided the most value, but it's not smooth.
That's beautiful. One last question and then we'll move on. So there's a really beautiful video for this song with one question that came to me the first time I saw it. You get covered in water.
I do.
At certain points.
I do.
How cold were you? Because I'm sitting there, I'm like, wow, this is really beautiful. Damon must have been like,
yeah, that was like 5, 6 in the morning.
You're like sitting in the water. It's clearly a sunrise situation. And I'm like, that looks... and it's not like up to the knees water. It's like waist high and more.
Yeah. Shout out to Ashley Battle. Ashley lives in South Shore, and like from their place can have a view of that rock. And so we sat in and designed the video together. And the tides were much lower every time I came over. And so I'm getting like waves coming over my shoulders.
Which looks cool. But I was like,
but it was cold. I was getting dirty. Those were new white clothes that all got ruined.
It's bold.
I had the fro out. It's like now it's going from fro to like Jerry curl looking. No, it was different. That was a long day.
That was when I knew you. Like, deep, I was like, oh, this looks beautiful, and was certainly front.
Yeah, that's where my old school acting and modeling childhood came in of like, okay, I know I can sustain things for the shot. And
totally.
So for the shot. And speaking of that video, I want to shout out that like
you're looking at it right now.
We filmed a lot of the rest of it at the Liberation Landing campus in the Sukasa building next to Breathing Room.
You see what I'm talking about?
100%. That shirt had been
it's
slashed
like,
so many times.
Yeah. It's like,
and the body is just a tad bit
it's
tense,
like
but the
5:40 in the morning.
But you're still very present.
It started to drizzle a little bit. No, it was not the most comfortable. But I also want to.
It was messy.
Yeah. I got dirty.
But you wanted to shout out everything.
I want to shout out that we also had this like communal space, but then community just showed up, and we have this like dinner scene. I want to honor. We lost one of the people that was in the video, Lanaya. So just for folks who know Lanaya, want to honor her life and legacy and appreciation for her being documented in that moment with us.
Beautiful. All right, let's get to the next song.
Building, breaking, building, building, breaking, building, breaking, building, incognito with the infiltration. We in this thing, beat the demonstration. Show and tell with that new from a different school, like it's integration. There's no treasure in half measures. If we gon' do it, let's do it big. How deep are the bones buried? How deep do you wanna dig? Create and destroy, ways to conserve. Some feel in my heart, some get on my nerve. People are people, now who do you serve? We get what we get, not what we deserve. Let's do it, get to it, go back to go forward. Chess over checkers, it's still the same board. Expand the perspective and narrow the focus. Everyone looking, but nobody noticed.
Down we go up against the road. It's and without and face and down. Shake it up and down. We go round and round. We gon' build it up. We gon' break it down.
We gon' build it up. We gon' break it down. We gon' build it up. We gon' break it down. Build it up, build it up, build it up, build it up. Break it down, break it down, break it down, break it down. Build it up, build it up, build it up, build it up. Break it down, break it down, break it down, break it down. We gon' get it right. We gon' fuck it up. We gon' keep it tight. We gon' loosen up. We gon' spark it live. Can you see it glowing? Always keep it moving, but don't know where we going. Lost in a maze like Frankie Beverly. Pain and joy, a sacred melody. Feel the bounce, found a route. Can't keep us out now. Open sesame. Challenge how you think. Evolve or go extinct. Building up new habits and breaking down the links.
Out we go up against the road. With and without and face and down. Shake it up and down. We go round and round. We gon' build it up. We gon' break it down.
That was Build It Up off of In Process by Damon A. Williams here on this AirGo listening party. I had to get in my old radio bag there for the little intro.
I think we can all agree when it comes to like the process and the fight towards liberation, there is messiness. There are no concrete answers, but like, what does it feel like to be in the position in which you are being asked to make this make sense for people? You are being asked to provide a route, provide an idea, and often your response is like, we'll build some things, we'll break some things down, we'll try some things, we'll fail a few times. We probably won't live to see the other end of this. Who knows how many of us will live given our climate crisis? Like what does it mean? Because now like we're kind of two tracks back to back that is asking people to sit in a discomfort, and again, as I said earlier, in contradiction. That I think that's my question out of that is like what does it feel to try to answer with something that brings people hope, bring people's resilience, bring people's some sense of calm, but knowing that answer in itself is always shifting.
Yeah, it's like it's really exciting, and you got to work really hard to message to people that you're not being full of shit, because the both and is often used as an evasion, and you keep using the word of contradiction, which is so powerful for us. Like, it is about reconciling multiple coexisting truths. And so, in this context, again, like during the time, I can't remember the exact month, but we had been doing large scale divest campaigns in Chicago while at the same time pushing to have a mayor in a structure that like we disagree with, right? Like, it's not just Daley, Rahm, and Lori were bad. It is Chicago is organized as an imperialist outpost, and this municipality, the mayor's office is a problem. But
it doesn't help to have real weirdos
yeah,
sitting in that office.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think within that, people feel a strain or get not disillusioned. That's not the right word, but discouraged from the idea of like what we are doing is building up new things, and then those new things are going to be small, are going to be messy, are not going to be perfect, and we are working to break down some really long-standing, powerful things, and like they are happening at one time, and a lot of people want to prioritize one or the other,
or that one happens after the other.
Y'all mutual aid people aren't doing shit, or you politicos are too focused on the system, and like what I experience seeds of is like, oh, we actually really have a very powerful potential of how we coalesce, or the coalition that we build through building and breaking, right? Like the idea that we, borrow from Ruthie Wilson Gilmore is abolition, which is also rooted in a lot of this, is not about absence, it's about new types of presence. But it really is about dismantling, and so we have to create new containers for people to be in relationship, create new containers to respond to harm and conflict, new containers to meet material needs. There's not enough structure to address people's housing, food, medicine, and education. And like, that's going to require a lot of work and messiness and messy moments. And there are certain institutions, we don't even got to make this about like government, and like, there are certain things within ourselves. There are certain ways we relate to patriarchy. There are certain ways we relate to consumption and class that we have to break down within ourselves. And through collaboration with Galaxy, realizing, I came in with the hook in the first verse, and I had 3 different approaches to how this can be. And he offered like, I'm hearing house in that, and like realizing, the holding of those 2 things doesn't always have to be so dark and heavy and like in your face. It actually could be celebratory, that we're building and breaking at the same time. And that's something to actually like turn up about.
Yeah, I mean, just on my one day of ever doing demolition work, that shit was fun as hell. Like, there's joy that comes from breaking something down,
Yeah, especially things that are old, that need to decay.
So let's talk about that house element. Like, obviously you're a child of this city, but you're also like a child of your parents. Where does the like house tradition show up in your life? Because I feel like it's not a thing before this that people would necessarily have like foregrounded and understated you.
So I wouldn't say I grew up as a househead, and I wouldn't necessarily even put househead on my parents, because that's a real deep thing. And so like there's a certain like space that's happening. There's a certain like relationship to dance and the body. There's a certain like relationship to DJs that like we ain't that deep, right? But it is our culture. My mom used to throw parties in the 80s that were very like, the cool high school girls, and they were like house informed. And my dad,
house informed, is a great term.
House post disco. And she swears now that she's always been a house head. I'm like, you false flagging a little bit, but
we're house adjacent.
House adjacent. And my dad, many people.
You were in the side yard.
You were in some apartment buildings. And my dad, people know him as a comedian and his performance through that. But in the late '80s, he actually, with the legendary house producer Steve Silk Hurley, released some of like the first Chicago hip house songs. So he has the song "Don't Bite the Dust," which samples Queen's "Don't Bite the Dust," and another one called "Syndrome." And these are like lore around like 95th Street. There's still people that remember my dad as Gucci D, and there was like cassette tapes that go around.
Which is just such a wonderful artist name too.
And so that's always been kind of like this humorous,
right.
back in the day, you know, my dad used to be a linebacker in high school type of thing. But with that, you know, grew up meeting Steve So Curly, you know, seeing Farley, like feeling like my cultural uncles in space, you know, Leon Rogers, Deion Cole do a lot of DJing, that's house related. So the relationship between the comedians and the house DJs was always there. And so, you know, throughout wanting to be place-based, wanting to honor my traditions in as many ways as possible, want to also locate things as tradition. Like we just think we are, right? Like we just eat mild sauce and we eat and we listen to house music, and Kanye did the soul samples, and like that's just, but like no, that's a culture. And so wanting to be more culturally informed and intentional, recognizing the opportunity to be in legacy a little bit more was like really exciting. And then also this piece, so you know, this was the second to last song that like got built. And so at that time, this like going through and producing and reproducing the songs like built some muscle of understanding what a song is. Because like the difference in the story I'm talking about, like writing these raps and making a song, the raps can happen in 7 different types of songs.
Right.
Like this could have been a grunge, hard, you know, and you might not be able to hear it, but like there are ways that
Did you record different versions?
I didn't for this one, but
there isn't like a Jay-Z Linkin Park
yeah, exactly.
for all these songs, you know?
But in my head there was like paths to take. And then a fourth option was
I'm imagining
was
like the operatic
yeah, or the baritone. You got the baritone?
Oh,
take us low. Take us low. What you
build it up, break it down.
That might get
need some remix.
I think that could have. I think the
happened.
sound of it. Now I think that it could have been a, you know, like a Yeezy.
Yep. Kind of like Yeezy's garage hard grunt. Yeah. That was what.
Which you lean into on some other tracks on the album,
for sure.
And so, but this has been like the most successful song. It's the most ear candy song. I think you don't need none of these other things we're talking about to like instantly get it. And also like part of my angst is, you know, debuting as a solo artist in hip hop and rap after 30. You know, like that was a big joke for like 25 years, like the idea of a 30-year-old rapper. And so like wanting to not be just reliant on contemporaries or younger people who I may not be able to connect to in the same way that I could have in the past. And also it's fickle. And so the idea of like how many people actually make music for people that are older than them and realizing that like as soon as I made it, I was like, my mom is going to love this. My dad is going to play this for all of his people. And that's a valuable base, you know, of folks. And so the song got on Soul 106 and has been in rotation with like the old heads. And that feels really good to be able to speak up, because I think there's like this idea of like folks who are older than us are just stuck in legacy music or to be disregarded.
Right.
Can I ask a question about a lyric? And you could just like gloss past it and be like, oh, that's a nice bar. But you say like incognito with the infiltration, we in this thing. And I wondered, given some of the like anxieties around like self-confidence, do you feel like, because interestingly enough, you talk about like that 2019 to 2021 period where you felt like this wouldn't happen. But also during that time, you're like faces on magazines and like your picture is taken even when you're like about to get arrested or whatever the case may be, or you know, you're receiving grant money, you're building organizations, which these are not easy things to do, but they also come with this sense that we also saw people throw on a vest and just keep wearing that vest everywhere. And people are like, what's happening here? Are we building a brand here? But the movement, as we've seen, is so easily commodifiable in late stage capitalism. It's always looking for a way to like pretend criticize itself. Do you feel like in the music, you ever felt like you had to answer for these things? Like, is that bar deeper where it's like, hey, no, I'm like, yeah, I know I'm in the nonprofit industrial complex, but I'm really doing this to our benefit. I know I'm on a magazine, but I'm doing this to our benefit. Like, do you ever feel like you have to answer for some of the ways your work was celebritized?
On whatever scale that did happen.
Right. Whether you were trying or not.
I mean, absolutely. You know, like the idea of trickster, the idea of infiltration, the idea of like underground marronage, we as we get deeper in these like underground railroad stories, there are folks of prominence who aren't tattered, ripped clothed, folks that had institutions, that had hotels, that had newspapers, that maybe to their counterparts, it wasn't seen as how insurgent their real grounding was or who they were really accountable to. So the idea of infiltration of we can't avoid these systems as an effective way to resist. Some of us have to engage, and there are many folks in the movement who have to do more engaging than I have to, who got like jobs working at shit, Yeah,
we've been saying this a couple of times now, but like, we spent all last year traveling and doing this screenings around 1 million experiments, and most of what we did was try to encourage well-meaning people to be okay with the fact that they have jobs. Like everyone is just like understandably like verklempt at the idea of like, I'm in this place, I see the harmful connections of it, I'm trying to do good work, I have access to this. Am I wrong and a terrible person? And what that does in terms of delegitimizing in people's own mind the things that they can make in there, and not to mention all the things they can make outside of there, I think is something like we've tried to encourage a little bit.
Yeah. And so like one of our highest imaginaries is the spook who sat by the door, right? Like that idea of someone who was deemed to be able to have access and using that for insurgency. Now, one thing I do want to like say or caution, I'm not the you got to make change from within dude.
Got it.
I hate that caveat. I feel like that's usually a way to like take away responsibility. Yeah. So I don't necessarily agree with that as it gets phrased, but it does need to be engaged in, and all revolutions. There's this book that our teacher Keisha Scott gave us that like gave what are the things that successful revolutions have had, and they've all had dissident elites, or like Che Guevara, Fidel Castro, Amilcar Cabral, like they had access to government and universities, and we're not the peasants, and so like that level of infiltration creates the capacity for something that is much more resistant.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a really interesting question because there's like different infiltrations, right? There's like on a political level, and then also like artistically. I wonder for you how that line, that word choice lines up.
Definitely. Like more and more, I've gotten comfortable. There was a time like, oh, I'm not a rapper because I haven't succeeded at it. But now it's like I'm not a rapper because I'm not a rapper. Like that character,
like an archetype.
Yeah, and like obviously I love hip hop and I love the form, the poetic form. But yeah, I see this music as not. Like I want things and I want to be appreciated, and I want to feel good about myself. But really the ultimate goal of
you
this.
Fucking asshole. How dare you?
But the ultimate goal of this is to be able to do the work with, more reach and more capacity. And so this as an entry point of how you meet me, I think is so much more digestible, so much more exciting, so much more colorful than just like a person coming in to talk about the world or teach a class or something. And so, yeah, this in itself is an infiltration. And so the fact that it's on the radio, or the fact that I can, talk to someone who's just thinking about music business, who's thinking about disseminating information, and like I can have a conversation with them because now I've produced this work that, opens up other spaces. Because I also don't want to be insular. So I want to talk to us. I want to be legible to us. I want to make something for this space that I do think is underrepresented, but I don't want it to only be for intersectional movement activist arts people. And so something like
it's not for the conference.
Yeah.
It could be at the conference.
But I want to be at the conference.
Right, but it's not
I want it to be for so much more. And so to infiltrate that relationship, because the thing is we got some real shit to address. Like we gotta talk about. And I don't want to start the relationship of like, hey, have you checked your internalized patriarchy? Like, sometimes I do start it there, but like it's easier to be like, oh, that's dude ass. And now let's talk about internalized
hatred. The idea of somebody just like knocking on your door. Excuse me, sir. Hey, have you checked your internalized patriarchy today? Well, if you haven't,
we have a bookstore for you.
Yeah. That's not fun.
You also like said it like, hey, have you checked if your meter expired? Like it's just like, oh, let me just do a little quick check. Yeah. All right, let's get to the next track.
For sure.
Found myself inside my body, beginning where I end. Was nervous about the system, but I'm cozy in my skin. I picked the bone with twig and stone, root out the decay. The flesh is temporary, but for now I'm here to stay. Send salutes up to the sun, show respect for the true order. Disregard your ranking and don't recognize the border. Establishing new boundaries, I'm proud to see the growth. Is it science or is alchemy? For now I'm thinking both. Breaking the dichotomy, hacked into the code. Going past the binary, new options to unfold. Would've did it all myself, but I knew I need some help. Commodified the pain we felt, packaged and resold. Sick of this
reality, it's time we make some new ones. Re-emphasize the fallacies, the palace got some new guns. Sick of the phallic worship, niggas rapping about they dick. Trading all the secrets, they treaty is a trick.
adapt to environment, defying misbehave. Banging on a drum, true up painting in a cave. Casualties from war took the prisoners as slave. We building up our altars and digging out our grave. Never gave up hope, but nobody will be saved. Never will be satisfied with more is what you crave. Island of the brave, took advantage of the brave. We building up our altars and digging out our grave.
I was conceived on the bed with cash stashed in the mattress, relieved, death guaranteed. The ease of sleep is the practice. When resting, I'm testing how to reach ever after. I remember your face, but forgot the sound of your laughter. This resurrection, a tradition deemed too dangerous to mention. Recollection, insurrection, came back hanging all the lynching. Revenge is eternal, feed that fire that burned you. My turmoil's internal, no one alive I could turn to. Not confined by their logic, we taking pride in our options. Got little 10 bucks out the closet, the bank gon' take your deposit. Ain't gon' invest in a bombing. You only worry about flossing, ain't kissing up to your boss. How much your ego gon' cost us? Memories a wave crashing when arrived at the shore. Can't care about rival survival, just gotta take care of yours. So make your bed in the morning and dig a hole for your burial. Know the world is much scarier if you don't know what you here to do. Hope the truth will come clear to you, hope you'll one day be free. When spirits appear to you, will you name what you see? When facing your fears, will you stand on your feet? Rather lay in my grave than to stay on my knees. Look cold to the earth, feel good to the soul. Don't know what life worth, can't return what was sold. Came from the clay, always breaking the mold. We gotta stay grounded, gotta fill up the hole.
Adapt to environment, defying misbehave. Banging on a drum, true up painting in a cave. Casualties from war took the prisoners as slave. We building up our altars and digging out our grave. Never gave up hope, but nobody will be saved. Never will be satisfied with more is what you crave. Island of the brave, took advantage of the brave. We building up our altars and digging out our grave.
I've listened to the project a few times. It's probably my favorite song as of right now in the most recent listen.
What is it about it that resonates for you? Why do you like it so much?
I think the amount of play that you had throughout the song. I mean, the beat itself had a very regal feel to it, a very ominous. There was sort of like a religiosity built into it that made you want to like sit still. I'm like, oh, okay, are you like recording in a graveyard right now? Like it was theatrical in a way that I really appreciated. And then just the same, like the different flows you used throughout. At times it felt like an homage to Chicago, and at times it felt like an homage to like the South, and at times it felt like the flow was a little West Coast. And so at different times it felt as if you were like really paying respect to the different influences that make up your sound and your just like the legacy of like lyricism you find yourself in, and that you're clearly trying to like the lane you're trying to exist in. And so for me to hear you try so many different things made me want to know, because now that I hear how you built a lot of these songs with just a ton of verses and really let the partnership with Galaxy and like you all kind of discovered the soundscape together. What did this song sound like on the page? Or was this, you know, a mixture of different verses, and that's why they all kind of have these different feels?
So that's such a great question. Thank you for that.
Oh my God.
Because this is a great question to ask her over here.
Oh, we know.
Top notch.
We've never had another guest host before.
Yeah,
You're the only person who's ever had that role. So.
I appreciate you.
Because you're a top notch question asker. So this song, which I am also very proud of.
TNQA. So I had to do the acronym.
It's needed. Which I'm very proud of this piece, and a lot of it came from then being in process. So I got to a point where it's like, okay, I'm going to the studio every week at this time, and I got these pieces. Some of them feel more songable, and some of them feel like things I was just doing for me and like wanting to be efficient with the time. But then you get to a point like, I kind of am running out of the verses that felt like already songs. And so the two verses were written completely separately. And then the hook was written as an intention to like bridge it into a piece. So actually, a few years ago, Green Slime sent me a track like, hey, you want to hop on this? And he finds darkness and humor and in a different way. And so it was something around dig your grave out, I'll bury you, or something around bury was. So I wrote this verse that I played on that tone, but then went the second verse that went much more to some ancestral reverence, spiritual stuff.
He's like, no. We're getting.
I never recorded to it. By the time I like had it written, was like trying to tap. He's like, I don't think I'm gonna do that anymore. But like, let's link up. So I just had that piece, and then wrote the first verse kind of out of meditation while we were on a group trip with our partners, and was like, oh, these feel like they speak to each other in a way, but they're saying very different things, but they're of the same essence and tone, that it feels like I can have a productive practice session right now. And then in recording the hook and figuring out how to vocally layer that, it was so pleasing that I was like, oh man, this is really coming together. And once we actually produce the music, we can be really, really dramatic with this. And so, so on the page, it were different scraps that then got put together and then felt really cohesive. And, I think more than anything, this is the song that speaks to the darkness, the grief, the weight, the burden, the beyond me, the intergenerational trauma that informs my orientation to the world, but that I don't always want to forefront or end on, but it's needed. And then also, musically again, like, so Kendrick, I'll say first, Kendrick and Kanye are definitely beyond even their like their lyrics. How they produced projects has probably been the biggest influence, and the things that I've taken in the most. And so wanting to take folks out of I'm just listening to a track to it's a more full cinematic experience. I want the first verse to feel like an otherworldly entity. You just went to a bonfire to, smoke and drink, and then a shadow came out the fire, and turned this into something else. Is kind of the feel of it, of like we're very much in a seance because we need ritual to process all that we've been holding. And so, trying to tap into that spooky as a way of release, because, often these like, very spiritual traditions that we're working towards now, outside of traditional religion of we built the fire, we built the altar, we burn away our intentions and our, it's very ceremonial. And like, how do I bring culture to that or affect that in a way that also doesn't feel kitschy?
Right.
Was the attempt.
And look, shit gets crazy, scary, spooky, hilarious sometimes.
Sometimes it does.
The other thing musically that this one always is like, you mentioned like West Coast. There's also like the, I don't know how intentional this was, but it makes me think the second Lupe album, there's the character that like rises out of the ground, the streets. And then there's also, so that's like West Coast, West Side. And then there's just like, also your deep homage to Westeros. Like the sword, like there's this whole other like mythical medieval world that is part of who Damon is.
They're like African Westeros.
Totally. Sure. That like comes through like the west side of Westeros, comes through a little bit. Like how did you think about like you mentioned it a little bit, but like the mythical, the sword sound, the like things being forged and the intensity of that.
So part of me writing that second verse that I thought I was sending to Green Slime was I was on a trip, my first time going to Africa. I was flying to Cape Town, and so you got to go to Germany and then you go from Germany. And so on that flight it's like, oh shit, hey, we going to Africa, like we about to have the whole Mecca experience. And on both of our 13 plus hour flights we were the only black people on the plane. And so there's like, I'm thinking towards my imagination of like African ancestral relationship and connection, and wanting to engage and engage a part of the political spectrum that like I don't adhere to because it doesn't feel useful and it doesn't feel like it will spiritually get us to the place we need to be, but I get is vengeance, and like we don't actually have that conversation enough. And I think making space for what it actually looks like for a Nat Turner style rebellion, and not us doing it, but what if they rose from the graves and got the get back? Like what would that really look and feel like? Just for like, it was like 2 or 3 bars of like, that's really the crux of where I felt like the whole theme of everything of like just this 1 second of release of imagination of
right, and not just ancestors are there to receive you and
guide
support
you.
It's like no, like
they owe their lick,
right.
And so what does it look like to know that that's a possibility, that's not off the board, and that it's not, we're afraid of that or that's not an option. It is through the reconcilings of contradictions we see a better path that serves us, that's more humanistic. But I think that's what protest is in many ways. It's like a organic, unrehearsed performance of
rising.
We could destroy all of this, and that is a power, and that is a power that needs to be respected. And you should be really grateful that we're with agency making the choice not to. That it's only storefronts. You know what I'm saying? Like back to Pimp a Butterfly, the Tupac conversation, like. The ground will open up and swallow the evil, and maybe the next time we're not going to be running in stores, it's going to be murder. And like that being on the table makes the choices we're making that much more valoristic. Right. you know? Yeah.
It extends what the spectrum of like response is. Yeah. Anything else to this one you wanna bring in?
For you, is the idea of like altars and graves, are those synonyms of each other? Are those opposites? Because like you say, like building up our altars and digging up our graves. So it's like my girlfriend has an altar to her grandmother, and that's one thing in itself, like this sort of constant presence, this this place of reverence, this place she can go and say her thoughts. The idea of digging up a grave is a lot more. I just think about like Mos Def sitting there in that Chappelle Show sketch. I'm like visually, like we got your leader. We got your leader.
Wow, what a fool!
Hey, you stepped on my sneakers. The only problem I had is that sketch was based in Chicago and they was using West Coast gay accent. But
you felt like that was the most factually inaccurate part.
You stepped on my sneakers. Oh man, I forgot. Yeah.
And so visually, for me, I was trying to like reconcile like what like are those things standing in opposition to each other.
So altar practice. Again, I'm not the deepest on this, but it's the culture that like we have collectively been building. It's something that's been around and in my space for the last 5 or so years. 5 to 7 years, and recognizing that as, again, this sacred, intentional, beautiful placemaking that's really about reverence and celebration. But at the same time, a part of all my shit is like, we need to deal with the realities of what's finite and our mortality, you know, and like part of being in relationship to ancestors and future generations is knowing the finite relationship you have to time. And so what does it look like to be accepting that beyond resisting white supremacy, you know, like where they were literally killing us, and they still are. But just in terms of being a human in community, if we all accept and don't try to evade our own mortality and take responsibility for that, there's actually so much, I think, connectivity we can build. And so, you know, I don't know why this came, but even on a more surface level, the idea of like, when somebody in our family pass, we got to pass the pot around or get the GoFundMe going, you know, and like, that's money talking. That's not what it's about. But the idea of preparing for this transition that is ultimate, and that actually there's power in that. And it's not only loss, and and so for me, going into work of like, McCarthyism can come, and, you know, there are still Panthers who are locked up, and that's part of what we're signing up for. You know, Medgar Evers got shot walking, you know, like that's the tradition we come from of like, actually, if we are stepping up to these things, you know, your life is on the line in some ways, and actually understanding how sacred of a choice that is emboldens you a little bit more than just like having to cower to the risk and the danger. And yeah, I think it's just beautiful juxtaposition of graves are hard work, they're muddy, they're, you know, it's
below
ground, and altars are these things we put up and usually construct in beautiful ways, and flowers and images, and or, you know, for those at church, like that, you know, to where we go pray, where we go put our knees down, where we give our tithes to at the altar. There's like an idea of offering and sacrifice, and yeah, and the connection to the earth, right? Like the fact that we choose to go into the soil as our cultural way of transitioning, and like the growth that comes out of that feels just like I felt it, you know, like that's what we're doing.
Yeah, this is one of my main bags, is that we need to have less boxes for burial. Like, we're going to put you in the ground, but we're going to make it impossible for you to decompose. It makes no sense to me.
Like, I'm big on the, like, let's become a tree.
If we're getting in the ground, let's get in the ground. Don't like cement, grave it out.
So
I think in one of those little fertilizer bags.
So I think I found that line.
But you got to eat really clean if you want that. Otherwise, you're fucking up the tree. It's the other thing. That's the danger of it. You know?
My tree can be crooked.
And so I found that line, trying to mirror it to, I think, is it the bridge or the verse? I think it's the end of the second verse, where I say, you know, make your bed in the morning and dig a hole for your burial, right? Like the idea of, I don't do it, but the proverbial idea of like, start every day with making your bed. Like there's work responsibility that we have. And like in the same way that we got to all make our own bed and lie in it, right? Like we got to dig your own grave instead of it being a threat or something that someone else does for you.
That's beautiful. And like a challenge.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to one last song. This is the final track on the project. And I think I'll say it's my favorite.
Hey.
This is Unrecognizable by Damon A. Williams off of In Process.
Ain't really got that much to show. much more, so much more than so much more, so much more than they can see. So much more than they can see.
I'm so much more than they can see. You're so much more than they can see.
So much more than they can see.
We so much more than they can. We so much more than they can. We so much more than they can.
We so much more than they can see.
Working to be all that I am, far beyond what they can understand. Cut out distractions, stick to the plan. Squash the beef and blocked all the spam. Got a vision they never seen. Crop the image to fit the screen. Copy and paste the lingo, but they don't know what it means. Truth is found in the interior. Reject script that cast us inferior. Readapted, be gigantic. Gentle giants put some fear in them. The mountaintop stretch past the clouds.
Ocean floor go also low.
Can't discover what was always there. Appear from thin air like Totoro.
They can't recognize I come from inside. For the love we strive, long as we alive. Never be approved, still stay on the move. We don't have to prove. So much more than they can see.
I'm so much more than they can see. You're so much more than they can see.
We so much more than they can. We so much more than they can. We so much more than they can. We so much more than they can see. Made it through another day. Oh, 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 oh. Ain't really got that much to show. I couldn't get it if they tried. So much more than they can see. 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 So much more than they can see.
So that was Unrecognizable, the last track. And I want to start with like the end of it. And it's the refrain that runs throughout, this idea of there's so much more, we're so much more than they can see. I feel like I know what you're getting at, but let's talk a little bit about that line. What does that mean to you?
So, you know, I didn't sit down with like that as like a philosophical thing that came one day. It was through the writing and like the structure. It just was the language that fit the vibe. And as soon as it came to me, it felt like, one, just a beautiful human offering. Because I think particularly in this time where, you know, our age group has grown up with the creation of self-publishing and self-promotion through social media, of trying to be seen, trying to get views, trying to get likes, and all, you know, feeling suppressed or feeling, you know, you got to get to a certain number to be valuable. I feel all human beings need to know that, like, you know, the interior, the sovereignty of what happens within our quiet inside space is so grand. But then particularly for movement at the time, or still, you know, as we're talking about abolition, people are only seeing the 2020 uprising through news clips that are being framed in a certain type of way to make it look like, one, it's a flash in the pan, two, it's like short-sighted and destructive, three, it's too idealistic and like you're talking about get rid of the police. And similar to, I think, what prompted us working towards 1 million experiments is this desire to like, not even a desire, the understanding that the beauty that's being created is not being recognized and is not legible to most of the world. And then in understanding that, we can do the work we do of try to make it more legible, try to spread, try to propagate.
Which sometimes is helpful and sometimes also isn't.
It's not.
Right.
But what if we accept that reality as a truth and actually find comfort in that? That like, they couldn't see it if they tried,
right? Actually.
And so instead of worrying about approval ratings, worried what, you know, when it get picked up by the Tribune or when Fox or somebody is
with the public opinion poll.
Yeah, and they're doing it towards their interest, even if their interest isn't directly in that moment to subvert or undercut our movement.
Right.
They are not aligned to what we are trying to do, even if they're sympathetic. And so much of us personally, so much of us in just social cliques and space, like, realize we kind of are being guided by these external approvals. And what if we let that go? And then celebrate the value that once you're present and once you participate, what you can recognize. Your family's probably not that interesting if it was just a reality show. If somebody was just watching footage of it, edited. But if you go to your Thanksgiving, it's like, man, I got the funniest family in the world, right? It's like there's something about being in it, being connected, that it expands the potential impact, the potential value, the potential contribution. And so wanting myself as somebody who felt with some visibility, but also felt shadowed and felt like I'm not being seen or afraid of not being seen in the way I want to. What if I actually release that? And there's a new freedom that I found in that.
How's that going?
I mean, I be tripping, it's been going. It's actually, I think it has helped me. Many of these things, again, because they either come innately or through meditation. It's not like, oh, I'm going to write the unrecognizable song. I'm like having to find these ideas. Many of the things line up kind of with mantra. Mm-hmm. And so as a mantra of, I'm so much more than they can see, you're so much more, we're so much more. Yeah. Some of these things are frivolous. Some, streaming numbers, views, and, I'm figuring out how to promote and how to manipulate and how to play that game a little bit. But that's costly. And what does it mean to recognize that there's an intrinsic but ephemeral, immaterial value to our humanity that is being discarded or overlooked? And if we reassess that, actually we're so much more powerful already. It's not, we don't have to strive towards anything else. What we are and what we have been is more than enough.
Throughout this entire project, and we've talked about it a little bit, you do not only wrestle, but in some ways try to normalize, in some ways try to make less threatening this idea of the ephemeral nature of our existence. And
light work. Literally the lightest. It's ephemeral.
Yeah. However, I wonder when I think about audience, how that messaging changes or people's reception to that message change. Because though legislative wins are in no way the goal of liberatory politics. However, for our elders, those wins were just that, those acts, that Civil Rights Act, that ability to vote, that ability to, even if just on paper say you weren't going to be discriminated, knowing that those things never
and it was being seen a little more.
But they are now at a process in which, or now our elders are watching, it is not simply that the idea of civil rights is still in the public space and we're debating their value. It's the idea that we are dealing with the most empowered form of white supremacy and fascism in our sort of daily live and politic and news cycle in a way that I think our elders thought was at least a time of the past, even as we still wrestle with these very things. And so this philosophy of the other side of your existence, like hope still exists on the other side of your existence, and yet you're at this moment in which you wonder if all of the work and effort of my time has been for naught, because they're also a part of a generation that's leaving their young people with less equity and less climate future and all of these things. And so how do you wrestle both this idea that I so strongly agree with, that we will not live to see the consequences of this work, with those who feel like that alone does not sustain them at a time in which they feel the work that they did is being stepped over?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. And it makes it more complicated when you filter it through the prism of elders, because this is where I have to struggle with a humility thing, because I want to honor those that were alive or maybe even connected to these traditions that I speak to so much, while also knowing from the study, but knowing from my experience of how people are now, that even if you were alive, even if you were wanted to, they didn't even see the work.
For sure.
So there's a misunderstanding or a gap between recognizing that it wasn't a few demonstrations that led to King and the Big Six, I think they call them, or the Big Five, you know, going and sitting down with Lyndon B. Johnson and getting this thing done, right? Like, it was people taking up arms and dying. It was people just trying to go to a neighborhood. It was people just trying to live their life. It was people demanding a greater humanity that was not saying, I need civil rights legislation protected. It is, I need to exist in this way. And so then the tangible is downstream, but the thing that we say, or like to the position that you were kind of like using as an avatar, things that those folks will say was like, well, this is what the goal is. That actually wasn't the goal. Right? That was the result of the humanity. That was the result of the work.
The goal was to have your full humanity recognized and given and not infringed upon.
And to end this system and to end these wrongs. And this was the strategy that took hold and has had, you know, impact. But it was not the end all be all.
For sure.
Folks did not sign up to say, how do we get somebody in the Oval Office to then get this executive order signed or, you know, or this legislation passed through Congress or whatever. But those things are important and they come and they are the result of what we do. And so similarly to now, right, like we weren't looking for the George Floyd Act, you know, as an example. 100%. And some people who were talking about, you know, the Democratic Party during this election cycle was like, well, the George Floyd Act, or they're going to undo that. It's like, maybe there is some good. That was even a little bit more insidious. But what we were doing was feeding people, and people don't see that. What we were doing is addressing folks' housing, and people don't see that. What we were doing, we're creating new containers of how we understand power and relate to each other. And when someone is harmed or when someone feels disconnected from the collective, recognizing that none of our social processes have prepared us for this, and we have to actually build new practices to respond and to hold to people. And that is not legible. And so I have a sympathy and I can empathize with, if all you see is what's on the news, then it's Dr. King did a couple marches, then we got this thing. If all you see is on the news is George Floyd got killed, that was horrible. A lot of people went out. I guess that's good because I believe that Black Lives Matter, but it's over now because the votes didn't come. It's not over, and it didn't start then. And so using that as an example of like the process. And I think what's important is like revolution in the wide way I think about it, but also in the like narrow way. Like if the civil rights legislation or the whatever act is not leading towards the creation of a new, if we want to call it state, if we want to call it government, political structure, then it's actually not that hot anyway. You know, it's actually some ways a trick or fool's gold. And so
with all the caveats.
Yeah. And so that's a sensitive conversation that, you know, requires, I think, intentional space to get to. But yeah, that's the push and pull on that of like, because I hear what you're saying, because I try to be careful when I speak of like, it's not all just woo-wah talk, or it's not just all about, you know, sitting legs crossed in a circle or your meditation. It is in service to creating very material things. But a lot of the shit that is most recognizable is a trick. Also, the approval that we're seeking is actually not in our best long-term multi-generational collective interest.
And you could roll back legislation, but that doesn't recreate a political reality from before that legislation, because there has been transformation. Things have changed. Like you can change what the laws are, but the political expectations, the ways people organize together, it doesn't mean that things stay the same. But there is no such thing as again. You can't make this shit the way it was again, no matter how hard you try to make it.
You know? And to that point of transformation, like, yes, the governmental protections were needed and are important. And I don't want to diminish or discredit. But when I look at the Great Depression through 72, 74, which is really what this time that we're talking about, what I see that is not the process of achieving civil rights. It was the process of going from being colored niggers and Negroes to Black African Americans, right? And like not to put valor on, because I don't even really use the term African American as much, but we became a new people. Like, and it doesn't get talked about as that. Like what we will accept, how we relate to the world, what we are, how we understand ourselves, our relationship to our own history. That's what happened. And then that caused then people to stand up in different ways, or to not cross the street when somebody's walking down, or to not accept being spit at, things that were once accepted when I was less than human. And now I am human or more human. And because of that, that shatters everything. right? Like a lot of the demonstrations weren't even that major. It was just existing.
I am a man.
Yeah, right. I am a person that can come through this front door and eat here, and then y'all go crazy. And then they see y'all go crazy. No, we need to be protected from that. But it wasn't actually the any NAACP, King, any of what they first started talking about is like the life and the dignity of us as a people and becoming that people. And so what the push against only doing what is recognizable to external entities prompts you to is like, actually, what internal work are we pushing towards? So right now, it's a question that I'm asking, like, maybe this may become a song, but like a refrain that's come up with me this week is like, what will we become?
Yes, a lot of options on the table right now.
And a challenge to folks listening, like abolitionist is not it. Like that's a step to the thing, but what are we in the process of becoming? Yeah. And that will never be understood, supported, or affirmed from those who are outside of that. And actually, some of that recognition, even if not intentional, even if it's just systematically or subconsciously, is a trick to actually stop you from becoming what's your potential.
Like entrepreneur talk.
Yeah, exactly. It's so much easier to say be a homeowner and be an entrepreneur than
be more human.
Be more human and operate in a way that ends our imperial domination of the rest of the planet.
Yeah.
And so, we're talking about this on multiple scales at once, as always.
Of course.
And what it makes me think of is an understanding that like ongoing process that is not about an end goal or an end point, but also then having this time and space capsule of a completed project. What part of the process feels complete for you? I don't mean what part of the album. I mean like of this process of becoming more human. Like what is a benchmark, if there's one, that it feels like making this shifted where you are in the process?
So I think what feels complete is that not only am I not trying to prove externally, I am no longer trying to prove to myself. Or even sometimes what we're thinking externally is just you. You're like imagining a voice that like, oh, they're going to say this if I do that. That's you. That's not so. And so there's a lot of, particularly.
Yeah, what's most likely is actually nobody's going to say
that. I grew up, with accesses, but I was pretty much normative. I didn't grow up an intersectional thinking radical. And then entered in that space. I was like, oh, yeah, I'm down with that. That's y'all kicking some real shit. I'll fuck with it. Sense. And I'm here, and I want to be here, and I want to do the things that I do through here. But whoa, I don't know all of it, or there are ways that maybe I'm showing up. And so, like, in addition to being a good person with my attempts and then being aligned, there was this extra weight or burden or strain I would put on myself to make sure that I'm continuously to prove, am I who I am striving to be? Yeah. And so I don't feel like finished or complete, and there's a lot of work to do, and no idea is permanent, and like am down for the struggle, but it's not to prove that I am. Like I feel comfortable and grounded in my principles. I feel comfortable and grounded in my instincts. I think that was another thing of like, oh, I have instincts of like, man, I could just tell y'all to shut the fuck up. But I know that's not right. Let me move here. Now my instinct is like, okay, this is what is needed, or this is how we respond. In the back of my head, I'm like, hey, other people could tell you to shut the fuck up. That does happen elsewhere, but we're not going to get to that. So I'm still aware that that's on the board. But yeah, I feel confident in my instincts because they are practiced, because they are not individual, they're grounded in community. I feel accountable to a network of people that have poured into me and nurtured me. I feel accountable to a tradition and many of people who are no longer here. And I feel comfortable in that and prepared to struggle, prepared for it to not feel good, prepared to have to grow and change. But I'm not proving anymore.
You are who you thought you were.
Yeah. Yep.
Or you are who you wanted to be.
Yep.
That's beautiful. Just very happy for you to have like reached that point in the process, and glad for the people who have heard it, and encourage all of y'all, go out and listen to In Process wherever you listen to music. We'll put the links in the show notes. Get in the mix.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And the ask is, for those who do listen to it, engage it, and enjoy it, to listen to it with people, or to be in conversation with people, or share. Like the music that reach me, that I stick with the most, are two things. The ones that someone who I was in community with or appreciated liked. I was like, oh, that means something to me. Or the things that meant so much to me that I then had to tell people about.
Yeah.
Like that's a different level. So, I'm not asking you to do the social media sharing or the things that are less personal. Like when people who get in your car, people who come to your crib, if this is something that lands, resonates, that you like, don't keep it. Share it with folks, and that would be the greatest gift that folks could offer.
Beautiful. Any last thoughts before we hop out of here? And how can folks find you and your work in the ways you want to be found?
For sure, at Jacoby Cochran, wherever you engage with social media. Listen to CityCast Chicago, #1 daily news podcast in the city.
Number one.
I think we dropped news and just put the #1 daily podcast at this point because of how much different things we cover. But similar in nature, like to know you, to understand what you were attempting to accomplish with this project, and to know that it was years in the making, is very beautiful. I think I currently sit in this place where I also am trying to figure out, how do I distinguish my creative output from my professional and like daily work when those things look so similar to each other. And at many times my creative output is a tool for my teaching in this more professional setting. And so I appreciate how vulnerable you were in explaining like what these last few years were like. I appreciate that you put that in the music, that you didn't, do all of those, thousands of verses and then sort of scrap them for maybe something more general or generic that would just sort of placate listeners. I appreciate that it still challenges. And now I wonder what it takes for you to put out another cohesive body of work, because this sounds like a lot of years in the dojo. I wonder, now that you all have all these reps in, what will be the motivating factors for you to pursue another complete work?
Do you want to make another one?
Yeah, I do. The shit ain't cheap. So I kind of went in there like, I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
And from the doing, I want to now build strategy. So I'm trying to figure out how to be more strategic and more intentional. But yeah, I hope to continue. I hope to grow. And I appreciate that, because that's like, I guess the moral of the story that I have started to bury a little bit of, like, in addition to, the big words and talking about movement stuff and radical politics, that's like the not so veiled message of the story. That I share that personal vulnerability. One, because I don't know if people see me vulnerable in those ways. Like, I don't know if that's how I'm received and understood. And I want folks, wherever you are, to enter in your process, right? Like, everyone has a practice, has a passion. It may not be something that's, produced and has cover art, but particularly creatively, if you take pictures, if you do yoga, if you cook food, if you make pottery, if you draw pictures, like whatever that is, get your 250 verses, like it does something for you. And then things will come out of it that you may have thought weren't possible. And so wherever you are, if you believe in freedom, like, free yourself more, because we need you to show up fully. And showing up fully means you have to activate yourself. And so I admire and I'm grateful for all the folks who have demonstrated that and been an example. I'm so grateful to, like, people like Jamila and all of Pivot and John Doe and Rick Wilson and Matt Muse and Mick and, so many folks. And I feel bad now that I started a list and it wasn't comprehensive.
I saw
Tasha,
you did it.
And so many
and
others.
Mine, and so many others. Because, like, being close to, it was like painful to be so close to such powerful examples, but it poured into me in a way that, like, has stayed and I think will stay with me for the rest of my life. And so wanting to be a part of how that impacted me for others. And so whether, if you make your music, but everybody don't need to do that. Like, do your thing, do it with passion. It might just be caring for people, and like be in that process more.
Beautiful. Outside of just the project, how else can folks find you in the ways you want to be found? If you want to be found.
Damon _AF By the time you hear it, there may be a website in my bio.
Hey.
May or may not be
maybe,
merch on
maybe
that
there may be
website.
shirts there on the shirt, but then I got to send the shirt. So
It's all in process.
It's all in process. But yeah, I'm David _AF. There's the most stuff on Instagram. The Twitter is still there. If you're checking this, definitely you could get a lot of me through Respire Media at AirGo Radio. And yeah, hit me up. No,
Don't. Listen to the things you make.
tap in.
Do your thing.
Yeah, there's different ways to tap in. But no, I'm joking. Like, if there's some shit y'all want to do, like, hit me up.
I had one bonus question.
I love a bonus.
If you don't mind.
Yeah.
Because you were just talking about like whatever particularly if you do like a creative like a creative arts practice, like give yourself to it, be vulnerable in it. Do you feel like the sharing it is a part of, like, is that necessary? Like, would you have been happy making the album and then just like giving it to your friends?
Personally, no. For what I'm advocating for, yes.
Okay.
Right. So for me and how I exist in the world and the relationships I have and the things that I was aspiring towards, this is a struggle. But the putting it out and like I knew it, but now I'm feeling it and learning it, I'm in it now, that is a whole different struggle and process and set of skills that needs to be learned. And so it's provided me another challenge because there was like kind of no moment of like euphoric celebration. It was like as soon as it was like, okay, complete and ready to be out in the world, I'm now feeling the weight of all the other things I'm not good at now. And so like, understanding that is also part of it. But yeah, I think outside of my experience, because I'm so public facing, that felt like I needed that towards completion. But that's not everybody's reality and that's not everybody's comfort zone. And so write your 250 verses, take your pictures. Different things have different like cost barriers. And so you may be trying to recoup that in different ways. But no, I think you show up better once you've poured into yourself in these ways. And I think we talk so much about capacity. And some of it is like time, strain, capitalism, survival stuff. But I think some of us are like psychologically burnt out, not for material reasons. It's because we're not like living in accordance with ourself. And so I think to be able to show up more fully, you have to take that time, you have to take that space. And so many of the creatives don't have an output. Like there are people whose work is altar building or tarot card pulling. Like that is intended
gardening.
To be private. Gardening, you're not, you may have a public garden, but ain't nobody coming to like clap or applaud.
In your backyard.
Yeah.
You're making it for you.
Yeah. Cooking is for the people who are eating it. And so I grew up, I have parents, there's a public performance thing that's kind of embedded in my life, and I needed that to feel complete. But that's not everybody's walk. And so for your path, if it's more insular, if it's private, that's still the process. Yeah. Thank you for that. That's a great question.
Yeah, you don't need people to listen to it, but you should listen to this.
Listen to this
project. We'll be back, reshaping culture for the more liberatory and creative.
Much love to the people.
Peace.